Since the Chief Executive is absent for at least the first portion of this meeting, we've got an apology from the Mayor. There being no other apologies, can I get someone to move that, please? Bob, and seconded Nicole, all in favour? Against and carried. Thank you. Conflicts of interest, are there any that are arising out of the agenda for today? None identified. We move forward to confirmation of minutes on page 3, I think it is. If I can have someone want to move in that direction. Moved Councillor Reid, second Councillor Epeha. Anything arising out of those minutes? None. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. We'll go to matters under investigation. Page 11, bear with me, scrolling very slowly. We've got only the one which is due next month, which is third line of defence. Kelvin, were you oversight of that?
Yes, yeah, and that is in hand. It's we'll touch on a little bit with the health and safety report, but yes, that is ready to go.
Yeah, thank you, Kelvin. Shane, you've got a question.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chair, councillors, those watching, and Lisa. I have a matter of, I guess, extraordinary business that I'd like to discuss, and it concerns an issue that arose on the last weekend, around communication and an escalating concern from members of public, ratepayers and the such that were, I guess, focused towards me, not focused towards me, they actually started to contact me, and it was around the shutting of Coes Ford and the communication that occurred over that period of time between, I guess, ratepayers and the communication staff here. They believe that they weren't clearly communicated with on the shutting of the Ford and the purpose that it was shut for. So the residents actually believe that the road was shut. They phoned a number of times, and that's what their concern to me. And I was tagged in a post and also phoned by a number of members of the public. And however, there looks like there was miscommunication or a misunderstanding of what was said between staff and also to the members of the public. The miscommunication was that the road wasn't shut for 6 months, it's actually the camping ground. So I was tagged in the post, and the post had about 3,000 views and 109 comments. I was disappointed because it was on a weekend, and although I'm a governor, delving, and I understand the difference between governance and operations, I felt no choice but to help the citizens in this operational matter by getting involved, because I was being contacted and tagged in the numerous amount of posts, and the post escalated. Mostly the 109 comments were mostly of a negative nature, and I would hope that moving forward, learnings from this was that we do actually monitor I know we do currently monitor our systems in our Facebook and social media, but in this case we didn't act fast enough, and it took till Monday midday for a statement to be released through our communications team to alleviate those concerns. However, over the weekend it just built up and built up and built up. So as a governor and a councillor, as part of this council, it reflected badly not only on me but on all of us. So I would hope into the future we can actually clarify our communications, effectively communicate, and also use our media channels, because that's the most popular form of communication today, because it's live. People are all over it. So we just need to be, I guess, working together as a team better with our community. There was heightened risk of well-being from our community flowing through, economically, farmers, people picking up children. So it just escalated where it could have been de-escalated quite quickly through an effective means of communication. I've got some other stuff here. Really, my 3 questions, and they don't have to be answered today. I've asked one about monitoring our media pages, brief councillors on any impending risks may cause issues for our community, even if it is the weekend, so that we are prepared to answer any questions that flow our way. 2, identify who is responsible for Coes Ford crossing and clearly communicate that back to the community through our pages. and what responsibility Southern District Council have for the Ford and either side of it, where our responsibility ends. There is members of the public that would like to be informed mostly on the increasing amount of shingle that's flowing down through the Ford and where that's actually going to end up, but just mostly around the communication side. So just keeping our community involved. And also 4 is the infrastructure resilience planning, given that south of the Waikirikiri, there is plans for more population going forward. So I hope that we can look at that and come back to the public with some sort of resilience plan so that in the future we can be better prepared. Just one more thing, sorry to take up this amount of time, but there's one risk that I haven't mentioned here yet. I haven't heard actually mentioned here yet. And under the heading of asset exposure, the most vulnerable exposed asset we have in our council, I believe, are our councillors. We're the forward-facing, front line of this council, and we are the most exposed. We come into the contact with our community every day. So I'd like to see some resilience planning and support for our councillors and the public, and just have a level of support. Because I feel that's what is needed for the growing population. Thank you. And possibly a workshop.
Cheers, Shane. Kelvin, did you want to make a commentary then? I see there's others queuing up. Is it on the same subject or, yeah? I just don't want to absorb too much time here because we're not going to get an answer, but
it's actually something that's been raised with me as well. So I just want clarification since Shane has brought it up. What is the actual situation now with regards to the Coast Ford? Because it is still closed, and I got asked about it yesterday, and the person I was talking to was querying why because there's actually 3 different gates, and there's a smaller one on the inside which they think is actually trapping gravel itself as well. And so I thought it was closed because it was only just the campground was closed, but the Ford itself is still closed. So what was put out as being the situation?
It was a reminder put through our channels to say that the contractors will be down there for yesterday, and there's a remediation plan moving forward. Yep, and that alleviated a lot of the stress.
Deborah, are we going to add to this, or we really just need to get some answers back to this?
We're just going to add to this because when we put the Ford crossing in, it was subject to a resource consent. We own the resource consent, is my understanding. And there's conditions on that resource consent that we have to make sure that are basically adhered to. Because it's an ECAN consent. And it would be really good to have an update on from our asset staff on that particular item and the consenting process and where we are sitting with the consent. Yep. There are some issues, as you well know, with the gravel, the build-up, and the design of it. And it's important that we uphold our resource consent and actually do the maintenance and the monitoring as well. So it'd be good to have a report back around that.
Agreed. I think that's the way forward. We're not going to resolve all of those questions here today. Kelvin, you want to make a commentary?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment on, so there will be a flood briefing this afternoon for full council, so some of that can be raised in terms of closures and responses and how long things are going to take. Regards the risk elements in terms of communication and how we deal with it, we'll bring that back as part of the wider review of the event, and Stephen's nodding and we'll be including that. We could be able to send out some brief comments on that just separate to this. And then Shane, to the point around council exposure, I'll hold that and raise it with Dan about the health and safety risk. One around resilience and one around just making sure that we're protected when we're out and about.
No, thanks everybody for the commentary around that. Obviously, we're not going to resolve that and answer all the questions without significant staff input. So, Kelvin, we look forward to some of those being answered. We move through, we've had that one matter under investigation. So move through Chairman's verbal report. So I'll kick off Obviously, this morning we had our field trip to SAC, and thanks to James and Sandrine for hosting us there today. It was good to see the level of progress that's being made and still being made to deliver a quality infrastructure, another piece of quality infrastructure to the Selwyn district. We were able to go through and look at what went well, what perhaps didn't go quite so well, and as we indicated on the visit, that we may we will look forward to a debrief on that process so that we get any key learnings from that as well. The other thing I'll comment on was last week's health and safety training, day-long health and safety training. Personally, I thought it was a very worthwhile exercise. As one of the things that's come out of perhaps a refocus of this committee is those internal training days for us, and I think there's real benefit in that, and it certainly it's a change in focus for this committee away from being purely audit focused to being more risk focused. That's not just health and safety risk, it's general risk. But I thought it was very well run, Kelvin. I thought good presenter, and thanks to Dan and other staff for organising that. We have got, I'll also just mention that there was a field trip the other week in conjunction with ECAN. Councillor Reid and others, Bob, were on it, Jenny as well. I joined briefly at the Ellesmere end. I'm not sure we'll get a debrief on that. I imagine it'll come through reporting at some stage. I won't ask for that now, but it'd just be interesting to see the concerns that were raised there, and as part of that debrief, obviously on the whole flood event, as we've just been discussing. The only final comment, I guess, really is the continued risks that we've got, the external risks we've got, continue to be really, from my perspective, central government legislation, and the major one, obviously, that we're going to impact on us is Three Waters, and that continues to be a work in progress. I think it's going to be quite a pivotal outcome for us to decide upon, both financially and delivery. So there's that, but there's also others happening around us as well. So there's the whole review of versatile soils, RMA, etc. as well. And just finally, I guess we just have to be cognizant of the situation in Australia and around the world of the new variant of COVID, and we're not out of the woods yet. So I'll move that as my verbal report for this meeting. We have a seconder, Councillor Parr. All in favour? Yes, Bob, are you a question?
Yeah,
sorry.
Just on the flooding trip.
Yeah.
Actually, I thought it was really worthwhile, and since then there's a group of farmers getting together and they're having a meeting, and I've just received an email now that ECAN want to be there, which is quite a big change to what we've had in the past, and ECAN are coming back to us in about 8 weeks with answers to all the questions. So I feel that we've got a long way on, and that was meeting with people face to face and sitting with them in the bus, and actually, so it worked really well.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, and I was hoping it was going to be a meaningful trip, and as I say, I couldn't attend all of it. I know that others of you did, so that's good to know. And I think it's part of that relationship building too, isn't it? Both with community, but also with our other TAs. So, yeah, very good. Yeah. So moved and seconded. All in favour? Against? And carried. Kelvin, Manager's report, please, page 12.
Thank you. First matter we'll discuss here is the AA Plus Fitch credit rating, which we've retained. It's a real great reflection of the council's financial position and its risk management of those financial risks. It was a good discussion with the members of the Fitch team who reviewed us. Very interesting point. One just drag out is the 3% of our of an average household income in the district goes towards rates. So it's in line with other councils, but it does just show where that bill sits in context of household income. Next point, Orion's annual report. So they've released their annual report for the financial year in 31 March 2021. Another good solid performance from them, 33 million after tax profit and a fully imputed dividend of 30 million. We should note though in their SOI that dividend will be starting to track down, so there will be less income coming in from that investment. Pleasingly, again, they've maintained industry-leading safety, reliability, and resilience service to the customers, so that's always good. Moving to the next point was around the health and safety governance workshop. I just concur with what Murray said. I found it very useful. It was good discussion from all the councillors and staff at it. I thought that was really great, the openness around that enabled us to discuss some things. There's a number of key learnings which have been addressed here, and some of that will come through how we do things as a management team, and some of the reporting and various ways we look at things, along with the replacement of our Vault system or using that system and upgrading it. We'll cover that off shortly where that process is. But really, if there's any other feedback you've got around that meeting, around those lessons learned, it'd be best if you feed those back through to Dan. Long-term plan closeout. Really pleased that that's out of the way and off our agenda at the moment. It is time consuming. It's fully published, ready for the community to be able to view and see. And we're now stuck into getting into the year-end process. We have received a letter from Audit New Zealand signalling that times are hard for the audit community around resourcing, but they would typically bring in staff from overseas to bolster the audit profession. With the borders closed, that's very difficult to deal with. I'm meeting in another capacity with Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand, where they are lobbying the government around opening the border to get skilled worker exemptions for auditors, which will help the sector. And just one final point there, we have received the audit proposal letter that will come to this committee. We are just in discussions with the auditor around the level of fee, and we just want to get some clarification on that before we bring that to here. And we'll just move on, which is part of this report. If we move through to, just run through here, the health and safety component of the report. Dan is with us also, so Dan, do you just want to run us through the key points within that? It's on page 67 of Diligent.
Oh, cool. My bad. Thank you, Stephen. Pushed the wrong button. I suppose we've changed the report again. So we've given you the report we gave you a couple of times before. I suppose the question I've got post the IOD stuff with Mike is, would we prefer this version or the version you got last month? And what additional metrics or things do we want to put in there? The report as it stands, I think, this month is preferable from where I sit, and I think Mike would probably agree with that. And as Kelvin rightly said, there's some more metrics we can pull in. By the end of this month, we should be able to give training competencies for the following month. So we've put all that training into our Compass system. We're looking at scheduling ELT site visits, and we can kind of track that over time as well as other leadership engagements. And we can also start to track our health and safety engagement in regards to the meetings we have each month with our different komahi across the 5 different GN groups. From that report, there's also, for the group's information, there's 2 reports. We've got one from Te Aratia, progress report, which I review each month, and we also got one from the Selwyn Aquatic Centre. So those reports have not been included in this deck, but if we wanted some summary of those reports, we could add that if required. Overall, we're progressing well. I just had a catch up with our comms specialists around our strategy, how we communicate that to the staff, to our kaimahi, and we're going to link that in with the org strategy work, so make sure we're connected up with it. Lone working, we're training today and tomorrow, the GPS devices. So we've got 22 inReach devices that will go out to the more high-risk staff. Some of our existing staff, like building control team, are already on the Safeguard app and are using it. They said that it's both a good lone working device and also a really good communication device if they need it for other purposes. Around the mental health and wellbeing, very important for all our staff. We've got a report coming back, or a proposition coming back from Lanier Wilson at the end of next week. The model that we're looking at is to train approximately maybe 10 staff in similar to psychological first aid to support the staff, and then also embed some leadership training around mental health and mental health awareness and wellbeing for our people leaders. I'll assume the report is read, and I'm happy to take any questions thereafter.
Happy to, if we want to move through that, we'll continue the rest of the report following this, Kelvin, and then ask questions. So what we've got down at the front table, we've got, I think, Annalisa was first.
So just with regards to health and safety, a few things. So, comment is it looks much better from my view, as this is a much better report from last month. A lot more content in there that's relevant and useful to us. So well done on that. Great to hear that the health and safety governance session went well. So that's a good result. But just urge you to make sure that those lessons learned is captured quickly, which you have done, but that then flows into our work plan. So that would be great if we could see that maybe next month on the things that you did take away as a leadership group, and how you're going to action that. So that would be brilliant. I noticed that in the report you've got reference to the drug and alcohol policy. So I've got a question for this one. I have worked through that policy in a few other entities, and my question was whether you needed to or had considered legal advice around implementing that policy. I know in other entities they have, just because obviously the seriousness of the nature of that. So that's question number one. A comment, sorry, I'm jumping between questions and comments here. Comment, great to see the mental health content in here. Still keen to see an assurance map of health and safety across the group. So I think we've captured that as an action from last month. So maybe we can have a time frame around when we can expect that, because I would like to see where assurance is coming from. So we're getting more as a Audit and Risk Committee, but it would be good to see what's going to full council, what's going to SLT and others. And my other comment, which Shane just prompted me into thinking, was another hat that I wore in previous role working for central government, was I did a lot of work around the PSR requirements, so protective security requirements, which I think depending on your level of where you sit in government, it's good practice or compulsory. So it's run by SSR, which is the special security, the people that spy on New Zealand. And I've been to them in Wellington, where you have to, walk through the door and put your phones in a box and you get a key. So I worked for a government Crown entity that it was compulsory. So what that does is, if you follow their framework, it actually makes you have a framework that considers your people, your security, and your assets. So it's rather than just focusing on health and safety, it is kind of linked with health and safety. So when I developed a framework for this Crown entity, it was working with health and safety, because you're actually considering not only the security of your assets and IT, so it's actually a kind of working group, you're also considering the physical security of your karahi. And the reason we did it was the post the MSD shooting. So that was when we implemented the framework to say, actually, we've done all this work on protecting our data and protecting our assets. What have we done around our people? So if you look at the PSR requirements, it's very easy to implement yourself if you get a little working group together. And you may look at it and go, it is quite comprehensive, but there may be some elements of it that you find useful in answering Shane's question. So that's it from me.
Do you want to run through those, Dan?
Yeah, is it all right?
Yeah, otherwise you'll have a load there that you'll never
that's
remember.
fine. definitely agree with you in regards to capturing the actions, and I'd be quite keen to get any feedback direct to me from anyone who was attending to say what they took out of it. And I think it's really important to understand what you took out of it and what you want to see. We can give you what you need relatively easily, but what you want to see as well, so we're all on the same page. Drug and alcohol, yep, 100%. We had Buttle Finday look at it independently, as well as TDDA's lawyers, and we went back to Buttle Finday with the final copy, so that was done appropriately, and we engaged with the union. I think they even got their legal group to look at it as well. So, and we've been through a lot of feedback, and we spent 3 weeks consulting with our staff, and very supportive in the nature. So we're pretty comfortable with that. PSR. Pre my arrival, they did, and Douglas will be aware that obviously OPSEC, they had an independent company come in and look at the security stuff based off the MSD thing. I think they followed the PSR model. I have to check, but there is some work happening in that space. We have done quite a bit of de-escalation training. We've done stuff around. We were just at the pool today. You'll see the way we've structured some of the rooms, and there's a bit more work to go on. But I'll have a look at that framework and have a chat to Douglas and see what things we may have missed that OPSEC possibly didn't pick up. Yeah, 100%. Around assurance, yeah, I think we need to do a bit more work around that. So I'd imagine you're probably talking as much about some of our partners, our other PCBUs that do work for us as well in that regard. But definitely a lot of work through there.
I'm just wondering, sorry, Shane, just before I get to you, I'm just wondering if we perhaps need to schedule a post-IOD training workshop just to answer those very questions, Dan, about where we see it. While it's still fresh in our minds, where do we see that going? And I wouldn't limit that to audit and risk by any means, because it was broken out to full council. I think that's a full council discussion, personally. So just a thought, we might be able to coordinate something, Kelvin, at a future workshop. It wouldn't have to take an enormous amount of time, I shouldn't imagine. But while it's fresh in our minds, I think that's quite timely. So, yeah.
Definitely the thing I was hoping for. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll talk to Kelvin. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Shane.
I guess just as a bit of a comment to follow that up, it was just around an issue that happened over the weekend, an escalating issue that still poses, I guess, a risk to the front line, which I believe are your councillors, all of the councillors. So thank you very much for touching on that. Are we moving Kelvin's report now? Or? No.
There's still further parts to it, okay. So we'll.
All right. Yeah, we'll continue then. I'll have questions at the end.
Okay. No, you're happy with that, Kelvin? No further comments?
Yeah, no further comments.
No.
In regards to the full report, that concludes it. So I'm happy to take questions on that now.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, Shane. Yep.
No, thanks for your report, Kelvin. And thanks, Dan, for all the work you put in. It clearly shows your input into the council. My question and it doesn't need to be answered now, but just around the investment with Orion, obviously the dividend is decreasing. So when do we get that report and what are our options there? 2, I took away a lot of great learnings from the health and safety governance workshop the other day, heaps, and I come out with more questions than I went in with. So thank you very much for that. My question to Kelvin is that can any of what we learned from that workshop be transferred over to finance? And I've asked the question around the Venn diagram where it goes from acute to chronic to catastrophic. And are we at a level council at the moment in our maturity of reporting that we can start, or whether we are doing that, progressing some of that stuff in terms of reporting?
Yeah, in terms of reporting, yes, we can, and it's probably not necessarily a risk-based reporting, because we'd be including our financial risks within the risk management framework. But in terms of reporting, being a little bit more pointed in some of the measures that we have, being very clear on where they are on track, off track, exceeding, rather than the historic reports, which are tables of numbers, which some people get and some people won't. So it's making sure we have a mix for all readers.
Thank you. And just one last question to Dan. The outcome of the deep cut to the hand at the Selwyn Aquatic Centre. I know I've got organisational learning opportunities, and perhaps it's a report back, but what was the outcome? Is there no glass now in the facility or not?
The event actually happened in the car park. So the person was, and our staff supported that person. It wasn't detailed in the learning report, but I caught up with James, and the person dropped the bottle in the car park, then tripped and landed on it, and our staff supplied first aid to support them.
Yeah, just one thing, and I'm not sure whether it's in the right place or not, but I'm aware of at Castle Hill, the people up there do not like the lighting, so that they've been undoing the covers on the light poles and taking the fuses out and such like, and then leaving them so kids could actually touch the live wires. So I just wonder where we sit with that, our responsibility, or whether that's something could be done to stop it. But I brought it up at the Castle Hill meeting on Monday night, and they're going to advertise the fact, but it's just a real worry to me.
I would suggest the first thing is, as soon as anyone is aware of that, that it's reported to council staff immediately, because anyone who knows that and doesn't is culpable, was my comment. But yeah, Kelvin?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, if there's any serious health and safety issues, they should be reported through, and Douglas's team will be onto it. Well, actually, it's Murray's team, but I mean, worrying is they can actually get access to the fuse, isn't it? So we'll log something there and get it looked at.
That's really the question is, are we doing the most that we can to actually stop this? And if we are, should we be, because we could be liable?
Well, I think the crucial thing there, as I said, is knowledge. Knowledge is key. There's no one's going to do anything unless they're informed. So it might be anecdotally known in a section of the community, but if staff aren't made aware of it, makes it very difficult to resolve that situation. Kelvin? Yeah,
I completely agree. It's that awareness. Quite often you won't perceive something to have been a risk, but it's when that occurs as the reaction to it, and how quickly we react to it and lock it down.
All right, that concludes that report. I'm going to have a mover and seconder for the receiving that report. Annalisa and Bob, all in favour? Against and carried. We'll move on. Page 74 is the financial report to the end of 31st of May. Kelvin.
Thanks, Murray. Yes, so this report is to the 31st of May, despite having closed out the financial year. The operating surplus is at 20.4, 5.9 better than what we've budgeted, and this is really continuing the trend that we've seen throughout most of the year. Capital program to date, 94 million spent, 27.4 lower than what we'd planned for, and we will have a not as sizable, but a sizable carry forward going into this financial year. A continuation of the trends we've seen around consenting matters and requests of limbs, and as I mentioned to you on the bus trip, we'd property sales this year were up 1,600 from last year, so that's just showing the growth continuing to occur. I won't go through all the detail of the report. The one thing I will pull out though is just we are flat on our borrowing to date from where we've been over, well, really since about November, and really no indication that we'll need to borrow in the next couple of months either. But we are putting in place, which will come back to the next audit committee around our treasury, starting to put in some risk management around hedging, which relates to the new capital program and making sure we're adequately hedged within our treasury policy. So I'm happy to take questions on the financials.
Yeah, thanks, Kelvin. Deborah.
Thanks. Just interested in operating surplus being 5.9 million better than budget. With regards to that surplus, where is it likely to be spent?
It will not. It may not necessarily be spent, but it would be reflected in the future rating accounts, depending on which accounts that surplus appears in. Where we would go forward into next year's plans and how that rolls forward. Just bearing in mind also that that surplus is before depreciation.
And just one other issue, and it's sort of like a side issue, but I will bring it up. Just quite concerned about the fact that while we are putting out property limbs, some of our ratepayers may not be actually reading or getting or understanding what a property limb actually entails and the repercussions that can actually have, especially in the building department. with regards to the siting of buildings on an allotment. We've already had a situation in Lincoln, and it's very important that people actually understand what that property limb actually says when you're siting a building. So I'm just wondering, do we need some education around this for builders, for designers, when an allotment comes in? Because there just seems to be a gap between what's able to happen on the site and then what happens, and then, like in what case in Lincoln, had to be rectified, you know, at somebody's cost because of the fence, I understand, was put in the wrong place. Or I know of another issue where somebody is building actually on a council reserve. So I'm just highlighting the issues of people not understanding the property level.
There's one key thing we can do is make sure our limbs are complete and full of the appropriate information. And what we are currently doing is running through a process to enhance the limb, to make it its appearance easier to use. What we can't do is provide the support in how to read and interpret. Our advice would be that people seek the appropriate legal advice and the appropriate support in terms of what they're doing. If we start to advise on how you should be reading that limb, we potentially open ourselves up further to legal probability.
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if it was you, Shane, or Annalisa.
Please.
Annalisa.
Mine's a very simple question, actually. So most of the financials seem to be fairly straightforward with great commentary explaining the variances. I just had one question, which was just from my own understanding, which related to the transport funding page, which I'll now scroll past. And it related to the emergency, the rain emergency works, which I think was a cost of 3.8 and 1 point something, can't find it now. And we've obviously put a claim, or there's a claim with Waka. But I was just, what is that fund? What's the emergency cost sharing agreement? Is it 50-50 or 60-40, or do they pay all of it?
No. There's an equation based on council's ability to absorb the cost and so on and so on.
Oh, right.
I would, without seeing the outcome of this, you would put a placeholder on the 51%.
There's about three sources. There's the Waka. There is the government fund, but we're, as Carl indicated, we're well under that. And then there's some Ministry of Civil Defence stuff that we'll be able to claim back for welfare and that type of thing.
So my other question, leading on from that, is given that 50% of that cost could be ours or up, are there any other costs that have come through from now we're a month away from that rain event? Is there any other costs that have come through that we've got more certainty of now, or is it still too early to total cost of that event?
So the water, there's a lot of the water treatment plants up in the back of the Melbourne foothills. I think they're pretty well through their assessments. Some of that's covered by insurance. Insurance assessors have been in touch with us this morning on a couple of matters, so they're making good progress and giving us some clarity about what we can claim, which is good. So, like for argument's sake, at the Glen Tunnel campground, when we claimed the road that got washed out, Bob. So that's really helpful. So it's that type of clarity we're now getting. What we just need to sit down now with Calvin at some point is just figure out, well, these costs we can actually reflect in June year, which we prefer, of course, and then how we ultimately the funding program looks.
It'd be good maybe next month to get some feedback around that, once we've got more certainty and clarity around what that total cost was. And
we're doing a report each fortnight to council with the most current information. So, we can inform you on that too.
Yep. Shane.
Thank you, Calvin, for your report. My question is quite protracted. So page 76, payments to suppliers. Can you just confirm that figure in the third unfavourable 3.009?
Yeah, that's correct that it's unfavourable. A large part of that relates to two things really. One being the increased volume of consenting.
Mhm.
So in terms of space, there's contractor costs which come through on there, but of course they are offset by the revenue increase in the fees and charges line.
Yes.
So that offsets. And the other area is around transport, and where the program has increased, but our funding has also increased. So likewise, there will be an increased subsidies and grants coming through, which offsets the cost down below.
So that unfavourable amount will be alleviated through other means.
That's right.
And so back to Deborah's question around the 5.9 better than budget. Should that you've said that goes back into the general rate?
Gosh, but it will go to the account which it sits within. So if that,
Okay.
so if the variance is coming out of the water account, it's back into the water account.
Oh, good. Yep, that was my question. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Oh no, sorry. I just had one more question. Sorry to drag this out a wee bit. So, because we're unfavourable by that amount, it would seem productive to actually run an efficiency program, wouldn't it? To look at our suppliers, staffing suppliers, and then find out where and why, and just how we can make efficiency.
I think drilling down into this, into the right area is pretty important, because most of that will be sitting with consenting and within transport.
Okay.
There's a little bit of water, and the water variances have occurred because we've having to take on additional water testing based on what we've discussed around at the council before around the water qualities. So yes, we're always looking at efficiencies and effectiveness of how we do things. So yeah, it's not that we're not looking at those.
I think that's probably Shane, a greater conversation for full council to have is about strategic direction, but I absolutely take on board what you're saying. The efficiency is absolutely crucial. We're in a time of high growth, and it's a possibility that growth never continues forever, does it? So we've got an opportunity now that may not be repeated for a generation, perhaps more. David, I see you've joined us there in the background.
Apologies for lateness, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. To Shane's question, I think the point is you can't take one figure in isolation and come back to what Kelvin said before. The offset is the 4545 up above and on page 76. But the clue to the answer is actually on pages 88 and page 89, where you will see there is significantly overpayment to staff and suppliers, offset by $3.6 million worth of additional fees and charges to meet that. And then flip to the next page, which is the roading one, where again, Kelvin's talked about the balancing out of that exercise.
There being no further questions, can I have a mover and a seconder for that report? Deborah? Seconder? Nobody seconding? There we have. Shane? All in favour? Against and carried. We move to page, I think it's 114, major projects.
Right, we'll quickly move through these and then take some questions on them. Selwyn Sports, we're aware it's operational and been highly successful around the number of attendees coming through here. Aquatic Centre, it was great to get down and see what was going on and where some of that money was being spent, which sits high in the rafters and difficult to see some of that maintenance stuff, but again, tracking well. Tiara, a bit more of a spend as we'd expect given the phase of the project. It's really starting to move ahead more rapidly, and significant planning now going on around fit out, opening, operations, which is really great when you get away from the actual build. And noticeably outside, a lot of landscape work going on around the sensory garden. Health Hub construction complete and in the fit out stage. Large amount of fit out had been occurring around for district plan, which we held there as well. And we are seeing customers rolling in there around the radiography space, which is good to see people using it. Pines, nothing really to update on that. And likewise the town centre projects and roundabouts. So happy to take questions.
Deborah.
Thank you. Just with regards to the Selwyn Aquatic Centre extension, I note that if we're looking at the project status, we're still a lot in the red with regards to our risks and our costs and our time. When can we expect a report to come to this committee or even to full council with regards to whose responsibility for what costs and the overrun there is? Because
there's a bit of discussion in public excluded, which will include some of that.
right.
But
I'm just being cautious in choosing my words at the moment because I realise it's public excluded, but anybody reading this would see, you know, everything looks red with regards to the project status.
Just bearing in mind that we've approved around this table previously expenditure for some of those items as council,
Yeah.
so they're exceeding the budget on the original budget, but they're actually council approved some of those expenditure lines. So we just have to be a bit cautious saying that we're exceeding. We've approved expenditure because of things that have arisen. So they're not unexpected as such. They're just over and above, to a large percent, over and above what the original budget line was.
Okay.
And just as clarity, the overall status of the project and the time cost and risk is an amber status, not red.
Yeah, not red. Yeah. Annalisa.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't got any granular questions around any of the individual projects because I've probably said them all before. It was good to hear this morning from the Aquatic Centre, which is just kind of ABC, good project management, but they talked about, I guess, the benefit of, as the operator, being involved in the design, which is just good project management, right? But that played out in, you know, making them obviously feeling engaged and part of the project, but obviously when you sit looking at the granular design detail of some of the benefits that they showed us, you know, they were able to be part of those conversations, which hopefully means you don't have as many defects when you actually open. So it is kind of good project management, but great, that's a good example that played out. So no granular questions. I am still beating my drum about PIR, so I'm still looking to have that form part of our assurance program. I guess Calvin can talk to that later, or answer that. But you know, my expectation is that we will develop a framework that says, you know, for a project of this size, of this cost, we will always do a PIR. We have a methodology that we find, and it should not just be on the you know, the projects that haven't gone as well. They should be on the really good projects so that we can capture lessons learned for you know, for future projects. So I'd quite like to see a program of work that shows, if it's not going to be by size or by cost, it shows that over a 12-month period we've got this project and this project finishing. What projects are the ones we're going to do PIR? But I mean, I've said all that before, so it would just be good to actually have that as an action and with a time frame when that would be expected. But yeah, that's it from me with regards to projects. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, sorry, post-investment review.
Yeah.
So just, it's a lesson, look, it's going back and actually involving, and it will answer at a higher level, it will answer some of Deborah's questions, right? So it's actually getting everyone involved who is involved with, if it's done well, it's a very collaborative, it's not a blame, shame kind of process. It's a lessons learned involving everyone that's involved in the project, going what went well right from the very beginning, you know, from design to execution.
Yeah, in addition to that, it's when we put forward a business case for doing something, we will have stated some benefits that we're wanting to have achieved, and therefore we'll want to report back that we have ticked the box on those, or we haven't ticked the box on it, and this is the reason why. So things do change, but Ideally, for projects like this, you would have an immediate closeout of the project, which is saying we've confirmed we've finished the project, we've built what we said we're going to build, and then a period after that to allow some bedding in, benefits to be seen, risks to being realised, and likes of that. You'd run an independent, and when I say independent, it's independent of the team who are undertaking the project, to review those to make sure that benefits are being received.
Shane.
Yes, thanks very much for the tour this morning through SAC. I guess I took away from that a myriad of learnings of what can be achieved and what we can learn retrospectively. I think there's a number of major highlights that are there, but also highlighted a number of not highlights. So I'm glad that we'll be having that discussion further along. Just a confirmation from the chair that overrun of expenditure to contingencies and variations, that we as a council have agreed to a level of contingency, and when it exceeds that, then that comes back to council. Is that the clarification?
That would be my expectation, Shane. Yes, that we would know that in advance.
I think the key thing with the Selwyn Aquatic Centre project is there are sort of, you could almost say, three types of contingencies. The main contingency variation, which is in the second line, the maintenance, which is the what you call stuff you find as you pull the building apart that you need to deal with, or stuff that you're doing as part of a maintenance regime, because you open the building up, and then the unexpected maintenance is the work that both these parts have been approved, by the way, but that was to do with the issue of fastenings from the ceiling, which you had a briefing on today. So yes, you're right, they all have to be approved and dealt with. There's also the issue with contracts, 3910 or 3915, depending on which one you're under, because you end up with contract law there too. So yeah, but we'll explore one or two issues, as we all know, shortly anyway.
Thank you. And just on the report, Health Hub, with all of the major projects reports, on the bottom I've got the risks and issues. Health Hub, economic uncertainty resulting in prospective tenants reluctant to commit to long-term tenancies. Is that due to costing per square metre, or is that, do we have any flexibility around that to entice prospective customers or clients?
Whatever reports to council on public scrutiny on the lease issues, we have used a number of mechanisms. There's been a general reluctance, I think, for the sector, the GP sector in particular, to sort of take that step forward. But as you know, we're now moving forward with some fit out funded in the lease, and that we've got to push on that in this latter part of July with GP process.
Thank you. Pines 3A, variations expected to exceed contingency by 390,000 as a result of the requirement for new power supply. So today we're agreeing on.
Shane, that relates to some expenditure brought forward from the next phase.
Yes.
Where we discussed it previously around procurement, and we could buy it now, which will save us a bit in the long run.
Okay. Yeah. So it's been approved at a previous. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
That's you, Shane? Yep. Annalisa?
Yes, very quick thing. Thanks for that great explanation of unexpected maintenance, because it took me a long time to get my head around what that actually was, but because you open it up and you find stuff and let's fix it now rather than fix it later. But so from the upside of that, do we recognise that potentially, if it is pure maintenance and actually it's more cost effective to do it now than later, then it's just timing?
Mm-hmm.
So do we recognise, actually, yes, we've got more cost here and therefore we're in the red, and Deborah's kind of speech, but actually 1 year, 2 year or 3 years time, we've actually got a cost saving. So do we recognise the saving?
That's a good question.
In our long-term kind of budget?
The answer is yes. Yeah, the really good example is what you call the wet floor surfaces, and particularly there were issues with the coving as it comes with floor coves up there. So that was something we head down to look at, I think, in about 2 years' time. But while you got your change rooms pulled apart for a few other issues, you deal with that at the time. So yeah, a lot of that's been done in conjunction with James Richmond and his team as to what would be work better. So you get that saving. You also hope that your contingent, your long-term rolling renewal program does work. Yeah. So yeah, no, that's certainly we've taken that opportunity, and there's a few things we've dealt with which might be seen as perhaps shouldn't need to be, but why you got the building down, then you do those big things, all those
And
things.
is your maintenance program, I guess, forward-looking enough that you could be looking at it while you've got something opened up in your own? So you might not find something, but actually if you're looking at your long-term maintenance program and going, actually, that's due to be replaced.
It is.
12 months' time, let's bring it forward.
Yeah, it is. But an example, though, is one area which is we found when we opened up the ceiling to have a look, and we found issues with moisture in the soffit. Now, the soffit, and we've reported on this, there's quite a significant cost to do the work in there, but we're allowing that to dry, and we will sort of monitor and manage that. So we've also done the opposite, which is, yeah, we've got an issue, but we think there are alternate ways of dealing with it, and we can buy a wee bit of time. It's also not integral to the program of work we're doing now. It can be done outside without too much impact on the building. So yeah, we do both sides.
Right, thanks.
Thank you. Just final thoughts. If there's no further questions, Kelvin, perhaps just thinking going forward, we're obviously closing out a lot of these projects, and they're going into the defects period or whatever oversight, I guess they'll remain there for those as they're completed. But we'll continue, I think, going forward to have an increased oversight on Town Centre Master Plan as that breaks out. And the other one, I just think that we perhaps need to look at including, well, we do need to include going forward is the Darfield pipeline construction. It's a major expenditure of ours, considerable risk to non-delivery if it weren't to happen in the time frame, both with central government money and also delivery of service. So I think we need to add that. I think the program is that we break ground there next month. So if we can add that to our major projects monitoring.
Yeah, that's fine. And any other large spend events will also be done here.
Yeah, thank you. If there are no further questions, I will ask for a mover that the financial and contract performance report be received. Shane and Nicole. Thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. We have now completed the public portion of this meeting. Thanks for everyone attending. I'll just ask for a mover and seconder to move into PX. Bob and Nicole. All in favour? Against? Carried. Do we want to have a short break, cup of tea? Does anyone want to